All
Okay,
right.
go ahead.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, now we're showing to you a few slides and first proposed cover of my new book, which is not probably different, maybe even a different title, but that's the idea. So, let me show you the first slide, which quantifies what I was telling you. And if I can please have the next slide. Okay, that's as you can see, it's an impressive slide. You probably know this because this is real impressive. You see, for 10,000 years, actually much more than that, Homo sapiens appeared on this planet some 300,000 years ago, and essentially it was a small group of hunter-gatherers in the plains of Africa. Then at some moment, bang, it exploded the way you see it. We reach now 8.2 billion people in the world, but some people say that we are more than that because it is not easy to count the population um, with accuracy. So some people say we are actually 10 billion, which is a number, let's say. So what's happening? Let's see the next slide. We zoom in a little. And the next slide, you see that things, it's okay, leave it that. It starts, this tremendous growth actually has a start, and it starts in the 18th century with fossil fuels, with coal. Coal starts pushing population up. Then in the early 20th century, that you have oil, crude oil starts arriving, and then another bump up of the population. And but if you look carefully, that the growth is not anymore exponential. It has been exponential up until to the 1970s, 1980s, and now it's sort of mm, slowing down, slowing down a little. And it is the start of the phenomenon that I was telling you about. The curve will eventually flatten out. Now, I told you mostly about how the dynamic studies approach this problem, taking into account all the parameters of the system, the economy, the resources, the pollution. But normally, much of the debate is based on a different approach, which is called the demographic approach, which is essentially a curve fitting exercise. I'm not disparaging it. It's a very interesting, very good field, but it doesn't take into account some fundamental point, which weigh on the growth of the system. And let me show you the next slide, please. And these are the projections of the United Nations obtained by using this approach. So the basics of the idea is that you don't make any assumptions. You see that population has been growing, you take into account the number of fertile females, the previous trends of growth, and you extrapolate in the future, you see the uncertainty is very large. But the general opinion of the demographers is that population will continue growing up to about 2080 at least, and it may continue to grow all along into the 21st century, at least according to this kind of approach. And let me show you another how it happens. You see this the data from the United Nations, and you see how it works. You calculate. You see this oscillation up and down, up and down. This is because when you have a moment of growth of the population, then you create a young population, which after some 20 years will be in a reproductive age and will start reproducing and creating another peak. So you have these oscillations. And you have, since, however, the population does not grow so fast as it used to during the great moments, the great baby boom of the 1950s, you have a population getting older. So the calculation takes into account that old people start dying in larger numbers. And when the curve of the births touches the curves of the deaths, at that point, um, growth stops. From that point on, it stops. These are one of the several data sets that you can find on this subject. This shows that this event could be around 2009, something like that, which is many people, including me, think that it's optimistic because let me show you the next slide. What we are seeing, and it is not insights, it's not an inner parameter, an embedded parameter in the model. The model cannot predict this because it is an effect of those factors which I was telling you about, which is due to pollution, to economic factors, socio-economic factors, to stress, and so far not so much about famine, but it may in the future play a role. So you have what is called the total fertility rate, TFR, is the number of children per woman on the average. And it has to be about 2 or 2.1 if you want the population growth. So this is the replacement level, 2.1 children per woman. And you see that, no, not yet. Can you please go back one slide? So, thank you. And you see we are very close to the replacement, to the replacement rate. If you keep going like this, we will go below the average replacement rate, which means that the population will not grow anymore because it's gone below. Not enough children are born to replace the elderly people who die of old age. And please, next slide. The calculations made by dynamic models took into account several of these factors in the best that it could be done. This is the same slide that I was showing to you in the book, which has the peak of population. The peak you see is the big curve which grows up to about 2050 and then starts declining. You can probably read the label population. And 2050, not 2080, not 2100 as the United Nations projections tend to tell. Then this being, of course, this is very old. This has been perfected, improved, changed. Next slide, please. And we have, for instance, this another edition of the limits to growth, which had a population peak around still around 2050, but more around 2040 or even earlier in some versions. Next slide. And these are some recent studies, recalibration of the same model. And now this one, if you look at the labels, which are not so easy to read, but the population peak should be around, in this recent study, between 2025 and 2030. We are getting close, very close. And can it be? I think yes. I think it's possible because the system is, of course, it's complex. Some countries are still growing. Some countries are already declining badly. Some places with like Taiwan, like South Korea, even Italy, where I'm speaking to you from, their population is collapsing, not just declining, collapsing. It's going fast. Show me, please, next slide. And you see, this is an impression of how these things could change. Top left is Ethiopia. Now, Ethiopia is one of those countries which keep growing very rapidly with lots of young women who are reproducing as young women and young men do normally. But you see other countries like Japan in the middle have already passed their peak and they're starting to decline. It's just the start now, but the last slide on the lower right is the historical case of Ireland, a classic Malthusian case in which you see what happened. Population really collapsed. But imagine yourself to live near before the peak, you say, well, nothing bad is happening. We keep growing a little bit slower than before, but we keep growing, and then bang, you go down. The great famine of the 1850s. This could be, not necessarily our future, because population really is huge, and there are many cases I could show you. Every country has a different story. In the book, you will find many case studies, like China, for instance. This is the case of China. You see, China went on like the rest of the world, growing very rapidly in the 19th and 20th century. And China is special because the law, or the one child law enacted by the government, which was supposed to stop this growth. In my opinion, it was a most ineffective law, because if you compare China with Taiwan, which did not enact such a law, they're about the same. So it's very difficult for governments to intervene in these kind of things, because they are making children or not making them is something that people decide, typically in their bedrooms. And it's not such a bad idea to maintain that the government should stay out of there. And anyway, people evidently decide that they don't want so many children anymore, or maybe also additionally, it is difficult for them to have them because of pollution, because of stress. And we can speak about these things for hours, but let me close this thing, please. Next slide. Next, you see some examples of countries, how fast the population, the total fertility rate goes down. Look at Taiwan, it's truly impressive, but never mind. Keep going, please. And this is a summary of the story, how it is right now. And you see you have an interesting point, which is this big imbalance of the fact that most of Eurasia and Americas and the so-called industrialized country are either not growing at all or declining. For instance, China started an actual population decline last year. It's reached the peak and it's starting to decline. India is still growing, but not so much. The only region which is growing, as you can see here, is Africa, and Central Africa in particular. This is going to create some kind of imbalance, but okay, this we will see what consequences they can have, especially in the current political climate. But let me not deal with that, because already tackled too many things. Keep going, please. Next slide. Next slide. We tend to finish. So there is a clear movement now to restart having children, to a natalist movement, like in the 1950s, as you can see in this advertising from the 1950s, this happy mother of 5 children. But now it is because it looks strange to us. Mr. Musk thinks that we should have more babies because the problem exists. We need to strike some kind of balance, because if population decline is not a bad thing, because it reduces the pressure on the environment. But if it declines too fast, then we lose our capability to keep society together, because we need people to keep things working. So we should use restraint and manage the population intelligently in such a way to avoid overpopulation on one side, underpopulation on the other. But the humans are not so great in doing these kind of things, so we will see that. And then to finish, next, and I think it's the next slide. Yes, thank you for your attention. And there is much more than what I told you in the book. As you see, it's a very vast, interesting, fascinating, the kind of fascinating that makes you sick sometimes. But it's I try to summarize what I wrote in this book, and I hope you will be able to read it soon. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ugo. And
Yes.
I don't have a great question, and I think Bill Reese does. So we'll start off with Bill Reese. Please put your questions and comments in the chat, and I'll take you in order. So no one is on deck, although I have a backup question. And then William Reese, you have the floor.
Thank you, Claude. Hi again, Ugo. Many times people confuse carrying capacity with population. So carrying capacity is the average maximum population that a habitat can support without damage to that habitat. And what human technology does is increase populations, but usually this has had the effect of reducing the long-term carrying capacity. For example, industrial agriculture increases food production and therefore populations, but reduces carrying capacity by oxidizing and polluting soils. So I would argue that modern civilization has greatly increased the global population, but has similarly or simultaneously reduced the long-term carrying capacity of the planet. Do you agree? And do you have an estimate of what the carrying capacity of Earth might be post-industrially at some defined material standard of living in your book?
Yeah, thank you, William. It's a very good question. Indeed, this point you're making was already raised in the first edition of the book, The Limits to Growth, that humans, not just the carrying capacity is not fixed. And typically, the growth and the technology makes it decline. Although in some cases, you can have a good technology which raises it. So absolutely agree. This is a point that rather unknown because we don't know exactly how fast the damage we have been doing, for instance, to the fertile soil, will start to have a negative effect on agriculture. So far, the agricultural production keeps increasing. So we probably will keep increasing for some time. But the future, I have to admit, is a little worrisome.
Thank you very much. Yeah, good.
I'm soliciting questions. I do have a backup question as people type in your question. I attended the first day of a 2-day webinar by preventing2degrees.org, and I will repost that information in the chat, the website. So I think you can still sign up for tomorrow. Tomorrow is supposedly looking at solutions, but they're very adamant that we only have about 12 years before we're going to hit 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels. So it seems to me, maybe this is a softball question, but food is going to be the limiting factor, not reproductive rates. Would you care to make a comment or extrapolate
Well,
on that?
yes, yes, yes. These are all things. You see, there are so many things in this matter, this subject, that you cannot possibly face all of them, not even in 1 hour of talk. And then you notice that I didn't mention climate change, but it is by all means, it is there. It's an enormous problem. It's part of what we call pollution because it has the same effects as pollution. Already in the first study of the limits to growth in 1972, there was one parameter which was called pollution, which then included, at that time it was not known, but it clearly included also climate change. Climate change, as you know, you all know, is having all sorts of negative effects on all kinds of parts of the ecosystem, like generating pests and making growth to some plants more difficult. There's some people who are hyper optimistic. They say, oh, well, but CO2 is good for plants. It is food for plants. The earth is greening. Well, it's as you know, it's not really true. Plants are growing, are becoming bigger, but it's a form of obesity because they get full of water. Also because climate change generates more water in the atmosphere. So plants get fat, but not more nutritious, more effective, more better able to survive. So we have all sorts of problems mixing with each other and sometimes reinforcing each other. So we are facing a very difficult time, and we can only hope that a moderate decline of the human population could help us avoid the worst.
Okay, thank you so much. Dave, you have the next question, and Peter, you are on deck. You can both turn on your microphones and your cameras.
Great. Thank you, Claude. I'm going to ask you, Ugo, for a bit of speculation. And it may be outside your areas of expertise. Nonetheless, I would like your considered opinion on it. What might cause Mr. Musk and others like him, such as Julian Simon, to suggest that we must continue to increase our population? Ultimately, might it be personal greed? If one has figured out how to game society to his own benefit, perhaps advocating for more of the same is rational.
Yeah, I think Mr. Musk is one of the smartest of the lot of the multi-billionaires in the world. He understands something, not everything, but he's a certain understanding. One thing that he understands, I think, is that a too fast decline of population could be a disaster. So he reacted in this way, maybe emotionally. You may be right that he has some emotional reaction to this idea. And so fortunately, I think that what Mr. Musk says on the whole will not have much of an effect on the way the world works. But
well, I think you're right there. Yeah, I agree with that. Sure, he's intelligent.
Yes,
he's also on the spectrum, the well-known spectrum. And a lot of times people on the spectrum do things that are quite different than what most of the rest of us would do given the same facts.
Well, many things could be said about Musk, but it would be mainly the speculation. So I think we will see. At least he has no intention to exterminate humankind, as everybody says about Bill Gates and other billionaires.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, Ted, you are on deck, and now Peter has the floor. So you can both turn on your cameras and your microphones.
Thank you, Claude. Ugo, that was a very interesting presentation. Thanks very much. I've been following these issues about the global polycrisis, particularly in the environment, but I also characterize there's a polycrisis in governance. And the consequences are that if we don't solve parts of the polycrisis of governance, we're never going to get anywhere with the polycrisis of the environment. On the issue of population and population decline, I'm aware from what I read, and I would ask you to confirm if this is in your view the same, that fertility rates are falling throughout most of the world, which you've already acknowledged, while male sperm counts are also dropping. And I'm just wondering, do you agree in these trends, and what might their implications be to your latest book theme?
I'm not sure I understand your question. You mean the trend of sperm decline?
Yes. Well, I mean, I understand that
Yes.
male sperm count throughout much of the world is also dropping.
Absolutely.
In addition to that, women are turning to, having fewer children by economic choice and things of that sort.
I think both factors are playing together. As you use correctly the term polycrisis, it's many problems reinforcing each other. It's called also enhancing feedback or sometimes negative feedback when it leads you to do to something that you don't like. So absolutely, the only thing I think I could not really solve this problem because there's huge trends, global trends, and if the population reduces not too fast, goes down, then we ease the polycrisis a little. We can at least hope that.
Well, maybe is this perhaps this fertility and sperm count issue is an easing? That would it be, and could it be an easing at a rate that's sufficient enough? I'm sure William Reese would have some view on this too.
Yes, yes, of course.
I thank you both. I think unless you have more comments, is that done? That exchange?
So,
Fine for me, thank you. If Bill wants to make a comment, that would be useful.
Okay.
Yeah, I would actually like to make a comment because look, most of the models that model population are demographic models, and demographers refer only to population statistics. And
exactly.
they don't include anything that's exogenous to population. So Ugo's already mentioned that climate change is a huge factor, but it's not in the models, nor is food production, nor is ocean acidification, nor is potential global war, for crying out loud. So the population models are just the barest beginning of understanding how the human system is going to implode. I think they're totally inadequate and very misleading in many respects, simply because they leave out the most important factors that are likely to affect population in the next few decades. Wonderful, Hugo. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, William. You see, I wanted to show you this book. These are demographic models. And this book, very recent, by these two guys, the two economists, Spears and Geruso, or Geruso, I don't know. And this is, I believe, what the elites believe. This is our future according to the people who govern us, except perhaps Elon Musk. They think that everything will go smooth. You see these curves, they go like
Very gradual.
gradual. They adapt themselves to the carrying capacity, and then we arrive to 12 billion people, or maybe 14 billion people by the end of the century, and for a few decades onward, and then everything will be fine, because according to these calculations, economic growth will be faster than population growth, so it will solve all problems, according to an old model made by William Nordhaus. We probably may have heard of him, the Nobel Prize. And he started his career with a model which was called DICE. DICE means, I don't remember what is that, but anyway, it's a model which assumes that the damage done by climate change and pollution in general goes with the with the square of the time. So it will be strong only in the far future, and for the time being, you don't have to do anything. You just have to follow and have faith that economic growth will solve all problems by itself, and so be it.
It's one of the greatest problems facing civilization, that economists are regarded as the arbiters of everything. The least reliable group of academics to talk about the future are economists. Their models simply do not acknowledge the biophysical realities in which we are embedded. The Nobel Prize to Nordhaus was a travesty. He argued that, look, climate change is likely only to damage agriculture and forestry. Agriculture and forestry are only, 3% or so of gross domestic product. Therefore, we can lose them completely and not worry, because 2 years of growth will compensate for the loss of agriculture. That's economic logic for you, because it's based on financial and monetary analysis.
But those are the people who have the ear of our leaders.
Exactly.
They believe this. What we're saying is supposed to be subversive, wrong, catastrophes, conspiracy theories, and all the rest. This is the reality according to the way people see the world right now. Powerful people.
That's why we're doomed.
Maybe. Who knows?
We're on a doomed path. We can still alter it.
Yeah, but we're doomed in different directions.
So with
Thank
that,
you, Ugo.
With that, I'm going to say that Art, you are on deck, and Ted, you have the floor.
Yeah, I'm
Go
just
ahead.
going to come at this from a totally different perspective as a social scientist. And I will accept virtually any projections that any of you wish to show from a biophysical perspective, from limits, from the point of view of population statistics. But I am more concerned about the way in which people will react to whichever way it does happen. And do they have the social capacity to accommodate whether positive or negative change in any way that actually accommodates their neighbors, work with them, allow them to actually come to grips with it in any rational way. Real people will make their own real decisions, and I'm not so sure that we're always able to project just where the breaking points are. Anyway, Ugo, how did you handle the idea of how people will react to the demographic and other changes that we can so easily foresee?
That's a $1 trillion question, Ted. It's nice that you ask me, but I don't think I can. There are various ways that could happen. It could react very badly, as you know. Things like the Second World War occurred because people in Europe, especially the Germans, were convinced that they were growing and they needed more space, the Lebensraum, the vital space. Now we're in an opposite situation, and many horrible things that could happen. But if people understand that we need more children, then maybe we can force women to have a children. Maybe we can force women to go back to the kitchens, or maybe whatever. Um,
So whose children and which children? And are the other people who are not the same as us really people, not just animals? I'm sorry, the perspectives that some people have been bringing towards the notion of accommodating others in any way, even sharing, has been anathema to the way in which many of our societies are now devolving. So sorry, don't wish to be a doomsayer. You guys are enough already, but
yeah, okay. So it's extremely difficult to predict. The future has been
yeah.
hitting us like a big baseball hat on our heads recently, and I think we're going to see even more rapid, unexpected, and maybe unpleasant changes in the near future.
Anyway, thank you very much for stimulating this stuff.
Mhm.
Okay. Andre, you are on deck. You can turn on your camera and your microphone. And Art, you have the floor.
Yeah, Hugo, there
Hello.
is a document that is out, and I have posted it in the chat that indicate that there have been 5 mass extinctions in the last 13 billion years since the Big Bang. And in fact, Dave Doherty had looked at that and said, yes, and there's 28 other minor extinctions in there. But the point is that there's no guarantee that the humans will survive the 6th extinction, which we're well into, and you've indicated that as well. But with all due respect, anything, many things can happen in 200 million years. They certainly have happened in the past, and there may well be one of the, humanity might miss out on a few extinctions and then pop up, a few 100 million years later. Have you looked at any of this in geological time and to try and get a sense of really how important is it that we focus so in such detail on this extinction which we are entering?
Art, did you see my latest paper? Is that why you are asking? No, you didn't
No,
see it.
no, no, no.
It's quite strange because it's exactly the answer to your question. You can find it. I'll send you the link. And anyway, it goes to examine these 5 big mass extinction and about the 28th smaller extinction, one very interesting result which came out recently and was ignored by the scientific community, just as the scientific community ignores everything which is new. This is very typical. But there is a direct relation between CO2 concentration and extinction rate. This is amazing if you think about that for a moment. And indeed, actually it's more complex than that, because not for the large extinctions, but for the medium and small ones, there is this relation. And I wrote this paper in which I proposed my hypothesis, which I'm sure nobody on this planet would believe, but I'm passing it to you just in case, that the CO2 concentration, high CO2, slows down the metabolism of aerobic creatures. So the human brain, this big thing we all have inside our head, is the result of a historical phase of low CO2 concentration, which has been going on for about a few million years. And if we raise CO2 to the levels which were common before, during the mid-Cenozoic period, then it may become impossible to oxygenate this huge, huge, huge brain, and that would cause the extinction of the human species. But that's one possible answer to your question. If you want to know my opinion, which I cannot prove, I think we have no chances. But, as you said, who knows?
Okay.
By the way, we still have, according to the latest geological wisdom, we have about 1 billion years of life on this planet. Even if we go extinct, there is time to have new species.
Yes. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Don't know if it's consolatory or not, probably not, but anyway. Anyway.
But you have to make that statement of hope somewhere in there, right?
Yeah, we should.
The obligatory hope statement.
I let myself a little bit carried away. I'm sorry. You asked me that question.
No,
and I've been working on that so much that I said, oh, wow, he's asking me the question. Great. Okay, sorry.
It's okay. You're a poetic guy. Just let it go. Follow your muse. So Paul Beckwith is on deck. You can turn on your camera and your microphone. And Andrei Zvorigin, you can correct my pronunciation. You can ask your question. You have the floor.
Yeah. Andrei Zvorigin. Yeah, it's
Zvorigin.
good. Okay. And so it was just based on how Elon Musk had that sign, make more babies. And I was just thinking that due to extreme land and wealth disparity, most young people especially, cannot afford to make more babies. They can't even afford homes. And we've seen the same pattern play out through all of history, like the Calhoun study, Rome, and all that stuff, where basically the elite are just getting greedy and then getting as much land for themselves as possible and nothing for anybody else. And then, well, the society collapses. And I'm wondering if Ugo would agree that fertility would increase if we improve land access so young people can provide for their own needs and have space for children. Though I understand with our current socioeconomics situation, that's unlikely.
Another good question, because you're right. Governments have been trying to finance people to have more children, but the effects have been very, very modest. No long-term effort. The government spends money, gives you a subsidy if you have one baby, but whatever the government reasonably can provide to support families is very little in comparison to how much a child costs. Mm-hmm. And so, I don't know if you have children, but if you do, you know that they are very expensive, and it's not the kind of money that the government can give for free. So I think as long as our society is structured in a certain way, we have this powerful, very powerful problem that, as you said correctly, people cannot afford homes, cannot have jobs, cannot think of making children. But it is a situation, at least, which evolves. Maybe if we can stabilize a little the situation, we can um, sort. No, I don't mean solving the problem, but eventually, I think, honestly, people like children in general. I don't know about you, but
Mhm.
I have two children, one son and a daughter, and four grandchildren. I'm very happy to have them. Not so many. I even doubt they cost me. If I were to reason in economic terms, I would not do that. So the humans I think, could recover also from this situation, at least in the medium term.
Mhm. Yeah, just related to that. Yeah, and I do have two children. And so I was talking to Grok, which is Elon's AI, and it gave one counterexample it found in the world. Basically, Israel is the one that it keeps bringing up, and it says that it's the only industrialized society where they actually have or urban society above replacement rate. But it is actually very different from a regular model. Basically, what happens there is that the government is building cities exclusively for people on welfare and then providing for all their needs. And they basically they don't have to do any work. All they have to do is produce more children. And the more children they have, the higher their income, and it's a very luxurious lifestyle. Um, Go ahead.
No, absolutely, you are right.
Yeah.
Israel's TFR, total fertility rate, is around 2.9, which is above. But if you think about that, it's not so much above. It's the
Mhm.
replacement 2.1, and they're desperately trying to keep it there, but I don't think they will succeed because they are an industrialized society with all the constraints and the problems of an industrialized society. So I think very soon, if you see the trend for Israel, the curve is going down. And by the
Mhm.
way, it is about the same value as the Palestinians. There is no difference. They live in the same,
Oh, okay.
they hate each other so much, but they're very similar, at least on this point.
Okay. Interesting. Okay,
Okay,
thank you. Mhm.
thank you for your question and comment. We have about 10 minutes left, and we have, I think, seven questioners. So if everyone could be very succinct, and because you're not using chat, I want to get Charlie and Rick in there. But Charlie, you're on deck. You can turn on your mic and your video. And Paul Beckwith has the floor for his question.
Yes, thank you, Hugo. So you mentioned there's probably a lot of inaccuracy in our present count of global population. In fact, it may be higher than the recognized 8.2 billion or so. So maybe you can comment on that a bit more, and also the distribution of, let's talk a bit about population of wildlife, animals on the planet. I mean, we're getting more and more livestock and chickens, for example, compared to, natural wildlife species. So it's not just the population that's important, but the distribution of what creatures we have on the planet. So maybe just enlarge on a few of those things.
Yeah, it's a good point, an interesting point. I haven't studied this point in detail. I can tell you there is a paper by some people, some demographers said, well, the rural populations have not been counted well. There are many more people in the countryside scattered around in the rural areas, and that's maybe there are 2 billion people more there. It's impressive, but it changes little to the situation. What you correctly said, we are encroaching into the ecosystem and destroying all the wildlife, and whether we are 10 billions or 8 billions is not such a big change, but it is not a good thing indeed. And we could discuss more, but I think we should keep going.
So what is the present error bar on today's global population? We say it's 8.2 billion plus or minus what? I've never seen a spread discussed. I've never seen a
I think
comment that that number might be a big underestimate. I mean, you're telling
we
me that's the first I've heard of this.
I can send you the reference. I have in the
Okay.
manuscript of the book. So if you remember, send me an email. I'll send you the reference.
Okay.
I limit
Okay.
myself to note that because that's the typical work of the demographer. The demographer has
Yeah.
very specialized in counting how many people there
Yes.
are.
Okay. Thank you.
And thanks to you.
My producer has told me that we are at time, and so I'm going to hold all the other questions for the unrecorded Q&A. And Ted, sorry to surprise you, I just sent you an individual text, but not much notice. Can you give our official thanks to our guest speaker?
Yes, I'd be happy to. I've known Ugo for a long time through the Club of Rome, and he is a person who essentially gives us new ideas almost every time we talk to him. I like meeting him. He keeps the mind alive and is obviously able to do that for the rest of us too. So quite frankly, we do need polyvalent, whatever there are people who try and put a little of their learning into virtually every sector. I rather hope to try and do that myself. It's a challenge. But I'm delighted every time to talk to Ugo, to hear him, and to try and come up with questions that will test him. So I'm delighted to see all you people come and hear him. I hope we can get him back in another year or two when he writes his next book, and essentially keep working with the good people of the Club of Rome who are trying to really make a difference. So thank you again. I would also ask everyone to remember that this is going to be online if you want to ask any other people to see it. And definitely tick underneath if you like it and get us so our YouTube is essentially seen by as many people as we possibly can. We have had some fairly remarkable audiences for some of our former people, and I'm sure Ugo is going to end up being one of them too. So again, thank you all very much. If you are not a member, please see us and join us. We are definitely a challenge to make sure we have the resources to make this happen all the time. And again, don't be afraid to nominate other people you think we would all like to listen to. So thank you again. I hope you all have a great week. And we have another one next week, and we would like to invite you again.